So I was just going to say that choosing childcare is such a significant decision that you make as a parent, especially when your children are young and vulnerable. Being able to entrust them with someone is huge. It's an incredible responsibility for the caregiver as well as the parent. And so I thought what I would do is just share some information with you guys if in fact you are looking at options and some resources, and then just answer questions if that sounds good. So can I ask, are either of you two looking at, exploring full-time childcare, or what are you thinking at this point?
We're thinking about doing part-time childcare.
Okay. Part-time, maybe in a half-day program or a licensed facility, or even just part-time, like with another parent sharing responsibilities?
Probably more like a facility or like half-day kind of thing.
And how about you, Brittany?
We are not planning to have any structured part-time or full-time. Although we are at the point where I'm wanting to, I'm realizing I need a break. But like you said, it's the thought of leaving her in someone else's care is very scary. So everything you just said was resonating.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you all know that there is so much research now that supports the first 3 years of life, that it's most critical with brain development, and it's the beginning of social emotional foundations. And so really feeling comfortable with someone that they're supporting your child through these really important developmental pieces is huge. So when you think of childcare, there's really a couple of options. Oops, it looks like someone's joining us.
Yep.
Do you want me to pause, Allison, or am I good to keep on?
No, you're good. Hi, Caitlin. How
Hi.
are you? Welcome.
Good, how are you?
Good.
Thanks.
Wow. Yeah, it's so good to see your face.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah, Roberta Yates from the Children's Council is sharing a little bit about childcare choices and options and just kind of taking questions. So she's here with us today. So if you have a question as she's going through it, you can ask it, and she'll probably check in with you too.
Yes.
Awesome.
And I had just asked them, Caitlin, well, first of all, we just talked about that making those decisions is a huge responsibility as a parent, and it's also an incredible trust factor that you have with the caregiver. And so being informed is a big part of it, but also I think feeling good about your options and your choices as well. And so I had asked the other moms what they were thinking about. And so what are you thinking about moving forward?
So I have a 5-month-old baby, and he hasn't been in any childcare yet. I was on maternity. I work at the health department, but I'm located at the middle school in Ashe County. And so I we haven't done anything yet, and I don't know what the school year is going to look like for next year. And so it's just tricky. We looked at some daycares before the pandemic. And so now, and the original plan was daycare. So now I'm just having a really hard time, thinking about going to daycare. And then it's I don't know if I'm going to need it full time. And so I'm just sort of all over the place because everything's changed so much.
Yeah.
And everything is unknown still.
Yeah.
All functioning that it's hard to plan when you don't know.
Yeah. And then it's also I don't want to be in a position where something's going to happen and then it's going to be oh, you're back at work, and I'm going to be I have nothing in place.
Right. Yeah. So it's always probably better to have multiple options versus.
Yeah.
And I had just referenced just the critical developmental period of birth to 3, and really the absolute importance of having high quality early education. And nationally, this is a crisis that we are all experiencing, and there has been a lot of attention and focus on revamping that system. And so there is lots of hope and positivity in towards that direction. But we are still in what we call, you know, in Watauga County, a child care desert, which means that options are much more limited than you would in a more, you know, urban area that have a lot more programs available. So,
and Roberta, would you say that that is the case for both like full-time programs and part-time, like preschool type programs?
I think you have more options with half-day programs because parents have more flexibility. So what we have found is the infant toddler full-time childcare slots are few and far between.
Okay.
And especially in the more coveted programs.
Okay.
And so what we encourage folks to do is get on as many waiting lists as possible. So you have some options, but also that gives you time to start doing a little research and then visiting programs as well. And again, everything is very different right now with COVID, where those options aren't quite as readily available as far as being able to go into centers and spend time and visit with them, because they're under some pretty rigid healthcare guidelines.
Sure. It's a different way to be able to view them. Now, are they adapting at all to like similar to what now, like Watauga did their virtual tour, which a lot of hospitals already had in place for labor and delivery, but like I encourage them to get that up and out for parents, because I was getting that questions for especially first-time parents, like I can't go and visit the third floor. Is there any, I don't know, push or like support for doing virtual tours or anything with childcare centers?
That is a really good question, and I don't know the answer. I know that a lot of some of the programs have Facebook pages where they post pictures, and but you do have to be a parent to, you know, be a part of that group. But that actually is a very good question, and I'd be happy to look into that.
Okay.
So one of the things that we do is we are a part of something called Childcare Resource and Referral, which is throughout the state. And that is a system to inform parents of, you know, when you're looking at childcare, what are things to look at, but also they keep data that you can obtain as far as, you know, available slots, the programs, you know, the fees, the subsidy. And so I'll actually put a toll-free number in the chat box. That is a great resource if folks are getting to that point where they're like, okay, I need to look and see what options are available. But so essentially when you're looking at childcare in Watauga County, you have a couple of different options. You know, we'll kind of start at the top and work our way down, but there are what is considered the licensed childcare programs. And so these are programs that have to go through a pretty rigorous process to be licensed. And then they also complete what's called a ratings assessment, which gives them a star number. And I'll show you on the division website, all this information is readily available. But so each center will get a star rating going from 1 up to 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the lowest. And so any center that is going to take subsidy has to have a star rating of 3 and above. But there are some centers who choose not to go through the rating scale because they may be a private functioning and they don't need subsidy dollars. And when I say subsidy, that means centers that you can get childcare assistance. So if you need help paying for childcare and you meet the criteria that the program will accept that, which is a significant benefit for a lot of families because childcare is expensive.
Oh yes, yeah. And trying to weigh, I think for a lot of parents, trying to weigh like, am I going to make enough to be able to offset that cost of childcare? And even if you sometimes almost break even because you want to keep that job or keep those benefits. It's a tricky balance.
It's a very tricky balance. And so I would say if anyone is in question to definitely check with the Division of Social Services who oversees the subsidy to see if you're eligible, because that really is a huge perk that you should absolutely take advantage of. you know, if you fall within those financial guidelines.
Yeah.
So
do you have access to those, what those are?
I don't know what the financial parameters are, and I think it depends on the number of people in the family, and so it's
okay.
But you can actually access that all on the division's website, which I'll show you in just a minute. So you have your licensed child care programs, and in Watauga County, we have, I think there may be 9 licensed child care facilities. If you're not familiar with any of them, there are 2 that are affiliated with ASU, Lucy Brock and the ASU Child Development Center. And then we have Sugar Grove Developmental Day School. We have Mountain Pathways. Now, they do not take infants. They start, I think, around toddler age. Yeah. There is Maryland Academy. There's Lynn Hill Child Development Center. There's Learning and Fun. And again, these are all in the division, so you don't have to write these down. I'm going to show you how to pull them all up. And then there's Sunnyside, and then there's First Baptist. So those are all full day, year-round licensed child care programs. Now,
So Greenway Baptist.
Yes.
Okay, and Greenway.
Greenway is actually a big program. Yeah, they have a large number. So those are your licensed programs, and then equally, you know, along the same lines is what's called family child care homes. These are private providers who provide a small in-home experience, but they are also licensed through the Division of Child Development and also have a star rating. And we have some really wonderful family child care homes in our community. And again, I'll show you on the website how to look those up. There's sort of the pros and cons of both. The advantage is it's a small, intimate setting. You have a consistent caregiver. You get to know the other families and the other children. The downside of that is you are dependent on one caregiver. So it may be that if that person has to be out for a period of time or has an illness, you don't quite have as many options as far as a child care program. But we have some really great family child care homes in Watauga County, so I would absolutely encourage you to look into that. They mostly tend to be on the western side of the county. There are some that are in Boone, but there are 3 or 4 kind of more on the western side of the county. Okay. Typically, they have about 5 children in their home. That's their maximum number. And they can also keep a couple of school-age children who come, you know, after hours or after the school.
Do you have those, or can you send those out as well?
I'm going to share a website with you that gives you lots of information.
Thanks.
So the family child care homes, I think, again, it offers you a smaller, intimate environment. You really develop a relationship with your caregiver, and you get to know the other parents. I think for some people, their discomfort is you're dependent on one person. Whereas in a bigger program, you may have more teachers. And then there's also that supervision piece where some people are not comfortable and trusting with one person where they feel better. In a center where there may be cameras in the classroom or that more sense of security. But we have some really great family child care homes, and I actually am a big fan of them because I do think you have that continuity of care, which is really invaluable. So then after that, you have what's called, you know, your half-day programs. So things like BUMP or First Presbyterian, and they provide just a part-day program. Usually it's from like 9 to 12. Mary School is another option. And help me think, Allison. Well, Kids Code does a part-time program.
What about Alliance?
Yes, Alliance Bible Fellowship also has. Okay. So those are great if you're working part-time or if you have a spouse who has a different work schedule. So you could, you know, you need coverage for 3 hours every day, Monday through Friday. When my guys were little, I worked part-time, and it was a great option to have, that they just went part-time, and it was manageable financially as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. all half-day programs are not licensed through the division. So they don't have quite the process, but again, there's lots of high quality programs available in that parameter as well. And so those are really the three categories. And then beyond that, it's really just people using, friends and family, or more of a partnership with an individual person who's not actually affiliated at all through the Division of Child Development's resources, And so those are programs that we don't have any input into, and nor does the division. But for a lot of people, it works, where you may tag team with a good friend, where you keep their child 2 days, they keep your child 2 days, those types of experiences as well. So I'm going to pull up, hopefully, the division's website, and I want to show you guys really everything you would need to know is on it. What I would say before we even look at is a couple things to look at if you're looking at childcare programs is, one, making sure that you ask the right questions. Things like, what is the education of your staff? There's a big push to have teachers pursuing higher degrees. So you're not having someone who's 18 and out of high school who is your child's teacher. That we know that the more education, the better the quality. Now, not to say that there aren't some incredible teachers who didn't pursue school, but moving forward, the push is that we want teachers who have education, at least in early childhood education. So you're going to want to look at the education of the teachers. You're going to want to look at the family engagement piece. How much a part of the program are their parents? Do they have a parent advisory board? You should always be able to drop in anytime. So that should be a given, an open door policy. But, for nursing moms, is there a place that I can come during lunch to nurse my child? Do I feel comfortable when I walk in the center? I feel like that first impression is pretty significant when you walk into a program. The things you're going to look at is, does it smell good? Does it look bright? Do children seem happy? And does someone acknowledge me? I feel like if you walk into a program and you're standing there and no one says anything to you, to me, that would be a bit concerning. So how are you received as a parent when you go in? So kind of being aware of all of that, and then just your own comfort level of, did I feel comfortable in that center, and were people responsive? The other thing I would want to know is, what is their child guidance policy? How do they handle challenging behaviors? And there are definitely parameters within the division that centers have to follow, but I still think that it would be important to know what their policy is. We're actually getting ready to implement a parenting program that Allison's a part of, Triple P, and working with providers, and our hope is everybody will be on board with that. But again, that would be something that I would want to know. What curriculum do they use? Are they devising plans where they're really engaging children and stimulating them cognitively and physically, and providing them that emotional and social support? So finding that out as well. And then for those of you who have never experienced childcare, there are very specific parameters about the sleep policies to prevent the risk of SIDS. And so I would make sure they go over their sleep policy with you as well. So any questions before we look at the website? Okay, I'm going to share this and hopefully it'll pull up.
Yeah, let us know if you guys can't see it.
I might have to just try something and see if I can get it to.
There it is.
Let's see. Okay. All right. Can everybody see this?
I see Zoom cloud meetings. So.
You're not seeing the Division of Child Development?
Nope.
Anyone else? No. Okay. Dang. Let me.
You may just, it may just be blocking it. You just.
Okay, let me try something else. How about now?
Yes. Now we see it.
Okay. So this is your best resource. And honestly, there is nothing that I could say that you cannot access on here. And so to start out, just a quick overview is you can just start with a search for childcare. And so, oh yeah, and the website, by the way, you can just Google Division of Child Development, North Carolina. But here's the actual website. It's ncchildcare.ncdhhs.gov. Okay, so what for those of you just starting out where you just want to see what options, you're just going to click search for childcare, and then it's going to pop up these little filters, and so you're just going to go ahead and search by county. And obviously we're way at the bottom. Okay. And then this right here is the list of all the licensed facilities. Now this does not include half-day programs, so just keep that in mind. But it starts with, it's alphabetized, and it will tell you the address, and then it'll tell you the license type. So is it a family child care home? Is it a 5-star license? And like I said, in North Carolina, centers are assessed on a star rating, 5 being the highest, 1 being obviously the lowest. What I would advise you though is, especially with the family child care homes, is don't make a decision based on their star rating. So for example, for this family child care home, she has a 1-star rating, but that is only because she does not want to go through the rating assessment, does not take subsidy. So she has not decided that it's worth the effort to go through the rating assessment. She's an awesome lady and has a great program. So I think the star rating is really beneficial in many ways, but I would encourage you to visit centers or programs before you make a decision just based on that. So let's say you want to look at, let me pick, you mentioned Greenway, Allison.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. So this gives you your options. If you click on each program, it's going to give you really specific information. So this will tell you their license number, the date they had their inspection. It gives you points for their sanitation, which I think is important, especially now that we're dealing with a pandemic. But the other thing is, so you can actually click above and it'll give you owner information. But this is the piece I think is really helpful, is it tells you about when the division completes visits. Okay. And then it tells you about violations. So for example, and this is public record, so I'm not sharing anything that's confidential, but so it looks like the division did a visit on June 9th, unannounced, and then they had a violation. And this one said that a child was not supervised at all times. So that's really good information to have. Again, I would not take that outside of the context of looking at the whole program, because as you can imagine, there are moments in time that we all as parents maybe had made a decision that wasn't great.
Yes.
So I would just say, you know, it's good information to have, because I think it just gives you an idea if there's a pattern, if there were a lot of violations.
Yes.
So, and so you can continue on and look and see. So there was an unannounced visit in May and there were no violations. And the violations could be something as simple as there wasn't a form signed by a parent, or a staff member did not get their training hours in. So I would click on the violations and make sure you read through them, just versus assuming that because they have a violation, it's some horrible thing.
Okay.
So you can go on and click on that, and then action taken basically means, has the division had administrative action against a program? And in this case, they have not. Okay. So that would definitely be something worth knowing as well.
Roberta, in an instance where you see a violation such as that, a child left unattended for 30 minutes, that could be any age child that they're keeping. So if it was a kid in a bouncy seat or whatever. That could be it, or an older kid unattended, or I guess that means not engaged with, sort of.
Well, that's a good point. And so what I would say is if you're visiting programs and exploring them, I think it would be okay to say, hey, do you mind explaining to me what this situation was?
Yeah.
You know, because this is all public information, so it's not a secret, and programs know that it's going on the division's website. So I think a conversation about, do you mind telling me what this was about, would be very appropriate. Or even just to say, have you guys had any violations?
Okay.
See if they're going to respond in an honest way. So there's lots of resources on here that talk to you about the number of children they're licensed for, their program points.
Okay.
And so this would address the star rating, and you can see, you know, in on Greenway that they scored high. They got 13 out of 15. They have a pretty good number of staff who have a minimum of an associate's degree, and then they look at other things as far as the environment, their materials, those all factor in as well.
Okay.
So there's a lot, you can spend a ton of time going through all of these programs and learning as much as you can about it. And then it also just gives you other information about who owns the program. So in this case, obviously the Greenway Baptist owns it. And that can give you an idea as far as some of their philosophy. So if it's going to be a church-run program, more than likely there will be some piece of that tied into their curriculum and into their practice. And so if that complies with your values, that's great. But if that, as a parent, you're not really comfortable with that, then you may want to look at other options.
Okay. Roberta, we had a question about being on a child care list, and if you get yourself on, if you get your child on a child care list and you don't hear back as far as openings, how does that work? And I'm sure you've heard of this scenario many times.
Sure. My philosophy has always been that timing is of essence with these. So a lot of times, even though a program may have a long list, if you happen to call them on that day and remind them, or if you stop by, that can oftentimes make a big difference. So I feel like making yourself known to the program, if there's one you really want to get into, I would make a point of checking in regularly. And once this COVID is all resolved, then stopping in, so that you're a face, and you and your baby are a face with a program, not just a name.
I think for us, we are really interested in ASUs because my husband works there, but they have been probably uncertain because of how the school is going to be and what kind of staff they're going to have coming back. So they weren't really able to tell us anything. And we have put him down since September because I thought I was going to need childcare in January when I went back from maternity leave. And then, of course, all the remote learning happened. So we were luckily able to stay home with him. But we still just haven't heard anything. And we've called several times. But hopefully we'll just, like you said, be persistent and it'll be great.
Well, and infant and toddler slots are probably the hardest and the most coveted, because once you hit preschool, you have a lot more options, because we have, the NC pre-K programs, and there are in Head Start. But I do think that it pays off to be persistent and to continue to remind them, hey, I'm still here. Look how cute my baby is. I'm going to bring you some baked bread. And then also looking at other wait lists as well can be really beneficial. And one of the things that I learned when my kids were young was it really helps to just make those connections with other parents. So if you're in a situation where you need childcare and there's nothing available, maybe coming up with an informal arrangement with a friend, it can be really helpful in the interim period. Where you may be, tag teaming each other. So there is also a ton of other information on this website everything from how do I find childcare near me? How do I get financial assistance? You know, if you wanted to become a childcare provider and start a family childcare home, in North Carolina, you can keep 2 unrelated children without being licensed. So just, I would say know that moving forward, that if someone says, hey, I'm a childcare provider, and they have more than 2 children in their home, they're running what's called an illegal childcare program. So I think that's just good information to have, not to say that person has any ill intent, they just may not know that. And again, it's unrelated children, so it could be, that they have their own children and then they keep 2 other children. And I think now especially there's a lot of concern about the health and safety guidelines. So making sure to kind of look through the COVID information about all the requirements that they have to experience to keep their certification during this period. Their health checks are pretty extensive, from stopping people at the door, checking temperatures, the process to clean at the end of each day. So I would absolutely spend some time on there. And then there's also great information as well. It talks a little bit about, again, the licensing requirements. So if you want to know what a program has to go through, it gives you information about child safety recalls, which is really helpful as well. If you have a child who has special needs, maybe factoring in some of that information as well. So this is a great one to bookmark and visit, especially if you're in the process of looking at this point. So does everybody have a chance to write that down before I
stop sharing?
Okay. Awesome. And then I'm going to write in the chat box this toll-free number for the Child Care Resource and Referral.
Awesome.
Well, okay, so what are some questions? I was looking, it says, yeah, some folks are on list and are really just waiting.
To hear.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to just wait because there's so much unknown.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's lots of unknown. Heather's a teacher, Caitlin works, you work in Ashe County, right? So there's a lot of people who work, especially in the school system, or doing the connected with all of that we don't know what it's going to look like. I wanted to also make sure we talk about that emotional piece, like what can we do as parents to help with our transition for our child? Typically, how does that look different depending on the age of the baby? So if we're putting in, a 5-month-old versus like an older child who might have more awareness of the fact that they're not with their parents anymore, and how can we make that transition smoother?
That's a great point.
I'm super interested in that. And before we go to that, can I ask one more detail question?
Sure.
So also I've been getting on list places, and everyone just seems to sort of say, okay, you're on the list. Okay, you're on the list. And it makes me anxious because I'm like, what does that mean? Yeah. And so I guess what is like what's the right way to go about that to really make sure? I mean, how often should I be calling? All that kind of stuff.
Right. It's that fine balance of being persistent without being annoying.
Yeah.
And, I would really encourage folks, once again, hopefully we move past COVID, that I think being able to be a presence and to stop in and visit is really beneficial. And again, having that face to a name, and sometimes it's just timing. You just happen to be there at the right time. So I would say if you can and you're able to kind of pop in periodically, and I think it's okay to say, oh my gosh, this is great. We're really hoping that we can get in. Do you mind just telling me where we are on the list? And what that will look like in a couple of months. So I think absolutely it's okay to call periodically and to just check in. You know, again, it's that if it's fresh on someone's mind, that can be really beneficial. So, and that really ties. Okay, Heather.
I'm going to say, I'm not sure if you're allowed to answer this, but personally, do you have centers that you see people mostly go to that you are, that you know parents have been really happy with on the most part?
And you're right, we're not allowed.
I was like, I'm not sure if you're allowed to answer or give recommendations on ones that you prefer, but I always love to hear from other people what their favorite places are.
And I would definitely, you know, utilize your mom friend resources to find out. But the one thing I have learned is so much of it is what's a good fit for you. I feel like being able to spend some time in programs and stopping by and just deciding whether or not you feel like because I know some people who have been at one program and who absolutely loved it, and then I know other people who have been at that same program who had a very different experience. So
yeah,
as much as I wish I could say these are the ones you should apply to.
yeah, and I'll second that. Just I haven't personally had any kids in those programs, but I've worked with families here for 9 years, and so you hear things, and everybody's going to have sort of a different experience. And sometimes, you know, teachers may change throughout those, so you may not have necessarily the same teachers that family had. So that's something to look at. I did want, Roberta, if you would talk about how the Children's Council is working with some of the child care centers to be able to offer them some more educational opportunities, and how those child care centers are kind of working alongside you guys.
Can we go back to transitions briefly?
Oh, yes.
I think transitions are really, really important. And this is something that we have been working with programs on. It's making sure that they're having planned transitions with children who are moving from classroom to classroom. What I would say is, to me, it's a red flag if every time you walk in and your child's in a different classroom or they have a different teacher. So I would want to look at what's their continuity of care. Is my child going to have the same teacher and be in the same classroom at least for a minimum of 6 months versus, you know, that moving around, because that's incredibly unsettling and is not helpful for attachment or just that sense of safety and security for children.
Yes. And some of the centers may have like several groups of the same age group, or how would that work?
So some of the programs have a blended classroom where you have infants and toddlers. And so the children are with the same teachers for 2 years versus programs where they move the child up every year.
Okay.
And there are lots of benefits to that, obviously, in terms of just continuity of care and the friendships the children make, the sense of safety and security. So I think that would definitely be something to factor in when you're looking at programs, if that's something that's important to you.
Yeah, so maybe the age that your kid is, how long will they stay in that classroom based on their age when they start?
Yeah.
And have the expectations. I think it's important to know what to expect as a parent. It's also important to feel like you're getting support from those parents, those teachers of your children, to help you with that transition, because they've seen tons and tons of families go through this. And I think I would love for you to speak to what can we do as parents to help us emotionally deal with that transition.
Well, I know that the first time I dropped my children off at childcare, that it was, as you can imagine, it's just heart-wrenching and you just feel like someone's ripped your heart out.
Yeah.
With my son, it was a very different experience than with my daughter, who she just went to a half-day preschool and she was like, see ya.
Yeah.
Didn't even look behind. And with my son, it was much more of an emotional process for both of us with the separation. So as far as transitions, one, I think it's important to know what is good for your child. Is this a child who takes to new situations easily? Is this a child who separates from you easily? Is this a child who is easily distracted and redirected? So if the answer to that is no, then you're going to probably want to look at what does my child need to feel safe and comfortable. But also understand that there is going to be a process, and that a lot of times when you drop them off and they seem upset within a matter of minutes, they're able to be redirected into play pretty quickly. So, but what I would want to know is, you know, what is the teacher doing to help my child to transition into the classroom versus not acknowledging their needs. So I think ideally, if you can start by just you and your child spending some time in the classroom that they'll be in. So it could be that you just go in and hang out for an hour, you know, and then the next time it may be that you drop them off for a short period of time. So it could be they just start off with, you know, 1 to 2 hours, and then you come back and pick them up. And then the next time you expand that. And then obviously the next time it may be that they're ready to stay for the full day, or you may have, they may have to, that you have to go to work for a full day. So I think having that transition, and you can kind of gauge when your children seem to be excited and interested when they come in, and how they're doing with their teacher. We're big proponents of having that family engagement piece, so that you're able to share a lot of information with your child's teacher about what your child's needs are. So this is what they do when they're afraid. This is what they do when they're hungry. This is what they do when they're mad. And so having that where you're basically, you know, co-parenting, for lack of a better word, with your child. And so that you have someone who's interested in what your child needs, but also that they're receptive to your input as well.
Yeah.
You know, I think the thing that is helpful is, again, if you're able to spend some time in a program and you feel comfortable, it makes it a lot easier to leave them. But also a lot of the programs now have these apps where they can send you updates throughout the day. Like I know at Sugar Grove, they'll send photos, they'll send pictures of something the child's painted. So several of the big programs have that, you know, that social media presence where they can send you 3 or 4 pictures a day, and it's like, oh, they are sleeping, or they are having fun with their friends, and they are smiling. And so being able to give that assurance, but also that ability to feel connected to them is really helpful. And then again, you know, if you're nursing, just having the opportunity to check in with them throughout the day, you know, to come to the center and to nurse them, and then to be able to leave and know that they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
It is hard. I mean, I think that it's really, really difficult to trust someone to take care of your child like you do. And so I would encourage you to just, if you have the ability, to spend some time and to transition them. And then, you know, if your child needs transitional items, like certain things that help them feel safe and loved. Right now during COVID, unfortunately, a lot of that's been minimized because of contamination.
Sure.
But once things are back to normal, it should be, you know, that they can bring their lovey from home, or their special blanket.
Yeah.
These types of things.
I'm assuming pacifiers are still okay. Okay.
Pacifiers for SIDS.
Yeah. Okay.
They are allowed to have pacifiers. They just can't be fastened onto anything.
Sure. Yeah. I've heard of some parents doing like transitional, where they start out with just half day, or they start out maybe, you know, with trial runs. Like they don't actually go and take their kid, but they get up and they see what that looks like. And I like it that you mentioned the fact that as a parent, it's okay to stay, you know, and watch your child. One of my first experiences leaving my child with someone, my first child, she was probably, maybe 6 months old or something like that. And I remember the child care, it was like a parenting class sort of like group that you went to, and they had childcare. And so she was saying it helps your child if you reflect very positively, like you're okay. And say goodbye and then leave, rather than saying, oh, they're crying. Oh, you poor little thing. Oh, and that might cause your child distress because you're stressed. What do you think about all that?
Your children aren't going to handle it any better than you do. So if you can be positive and like, you know what, I'm going to be back. I'll be back in 5, or, you know, and that you can be upbeat and make that exit, it definitely makes it easier for the child to transition. I know that, like, I wanted my kids to be sad and to need me.
Yeah.
So my daughter just was like, see ya. And she was that way the rest of her life. I looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, does she look a little sad? Like,
yes.
so I think you have to be aware of your own needs and feelings and keep those in check for sure. So yes, I completely agree, Allison. I think they're going to handle it as good as we handle it for the most part.
Yeah. And I think it's totally okay to allow yourself to just go back in the car and just cry it all out, because we need to do that too.
There's days when it's like, yay, like I can talk to adults and go to the bathroom by myself. And
yeah.
So it's just the range of emotions can be all over the place. And the thing that I really suggest doing also is, depending on the age of your child, is, you know, having conversations ahead of time, reading books about going to school, talking about it. If you have the opportunity to take pictures, so before your child starts, talk about, this is going to be your teacher, this is going to be your school. And, you know, we're going to get up and kind of go through the routine with the child so that they know what to expect and that it feels familiar when it actually happens. I think can be helpful as well. Yeah,
like using their teacher's name at home, and
and having a picture book of what their day is going to look like. And I should mention, if you are doing short little periods of time, try to do it around times that there are fun times. Like, you don't want to drop your child off when it's going to be like lunch and nap. So maybe time it where they're going to be outside, and that's an easy time to transition them, or that they're going to have, you know, circle time and they can easily get engaged.
That's a great tips.
So any other questions?
I have, this is a very personal question. Maybe someone can just, if anyone has any insight. So I'm working in Ash, but I live in Watauga. I live in the western part of the county, and I'm really going back and forth between whether I find a childcare place closer to work or closer to home. And I'm nursing, so there's that to consider. But I just keep, like, I've looked at some in Ash before COVID and Watauga, and probably I looked at Sugar Grove and I really liked that one. And then the ones in Ash came highly recommended from people that work there. So yeah, just going back and forth. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I have it personally. For me, I like to know that I can get to my child quickly if the need is there.
Yeah.
But that's a very personal decision. And there are some great programs in Ash. I know that Generations and Ash Developmental Day have great reputations. But I guess it also depends on how much would the other parent be a part of this, and in terms of looking at your schedules. And, you know, as a teacher, you probably have to get there pretty early and have to leave pretty early. And so, you know, would it work better for your husband or your partner to drop, you know, your child off? So I think there are those variables, as well as who's more accessible if the child's sick and needs to pick them up.
Yeah.
So what about you, Allison? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, you know, we, as parents, we have to make the best choices that we think is right. And sometimes those are going to be right, and sometimes those are going to be wrong. And I have heard parents who are like, they put their kids in a childcare center and they're like, oh, this is just not working. Or they choose that childcare center because they love it, but yet the reality of the drive and the hassle or the whatever just doesn't work for your family. Does that make sense? So it might be ideal in some ways, but not in reality.
Yeah, so. I think a really good point.
It is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Heather.
I was going to say, I just have a question of, you were talking about separation anxiety and things like that. I feel like I'm in a situation where we have never really had to be separated because he's always been either with myself or with my husband. And so I guess I have concerns about when we do eventually send him to childcare, like how will that look, or how can we make it a little bit better for him to be around strangers. I mean, he sees neighbors at a distance now, but it's just so hard with seeing people. And
Heather, can I ask how old your baby is?
He is 9 months. So when we hopefully put him in, he'll be close to a year because his birthday was September 19th. So we're looking at hopefully starting in August. If we have to, I mean, because I know we'll both probably be back at work, and I don't know what that'll look like since we're both teachers, my husband and I both, so we'll see. Yeah, so I didn't know if you had any tips on that, on strangers. I mean, he does great on videos because he sees grandparents on the videos, but I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I think that's a concern for a lot of parents, and we have done several Babes on Blankets on separation anxiety because that is a reality for a lot of kids, and there are certain ages where kids are more susceptible to that. I will definitely put that in the notes, and maybe we can do Babes on Blankets just focus on separation anxiety, so we can kind of talk about that and how to handle that as a parent, how to help support your kid through that, help support yourself through that. So we could definitely do that. Roberto, what other things can you add to that?
I just think that again, having that familiarity for them with who that childcare person is going to be could really be key. And so whether it be spending some time around that person, having your child familiar with their voice, it could be their smells. I'm all about senses. So maybe having to rub a t-shirt and, you know, let it be around your child so that the person's going to smell familiar, like things like that you can do to help make that process easy. And I mean, sometimes you can just gauge how your child feels about some people. You know, maybe they walk in and they're just completely taken with this new person, or it could be that they're not. And so I would say having a conversation with that person about what things can be done on both ends to make this easier. So I think communication is really key, and being honest, because it's really hard for a teacher if a child is not adapting just as much as it is, you know, on a parent, where, so sharing strategies of things you do to comfort them, you know, and again, I think being certainly aware of our own responses can be key.
Yes.
Are we sending a positive message about this person is safe and you'll be okay here?
Yeah.
And as Allison said, you know, it's very developmentally appropriate at certain periods for children to experience that. And so just making sure that their needs are met through that.
Yeah, comforting them the best that you can and supporting that. Yeah, it's
important. Like, I know there's different thoughts on this, but I have never been one who thinks you should just sneak away.
Yes,
like,
no.
I think I'm going to go and I will be back. And,
yes.
You know, preparing them versus parent, you know, that, well, just sneak out.
Yeah, not a good idea.
The message that's not really healthy. So
yeah.
So those were just some thoughts I had. Any extra, Allison? I know there's a lot. I'm sure, Heather, if you want to spend a little time researching it, there's a lot of.
I have, I mean, particular points that the Positive Parenting Program does with separation anxiety are some of the things that we've, you know, already talked about, but I think if a child has quality time with you on other instances, then they're going to be less likely to have that. And you guys are already giving them all that lovely quality time. And then just spending time reconnecting. I know Roberta mentioned this before, but, you know, staying for a little bit and letting your child see you feel comfortable and trustworthy in that space is going to help your child build that trust with those people. Talking with having, happy, smiley conversations as you're there talking with their teacher helps them build trust with that person for sure. So there's lots of different things. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it could be a whole nother babes on blankets, but we can do that. But I think there's just things like that are really important that we can do for our child.
And one of the things that I have observed over time is, I think when people start off their morning very chaotically, where it's rush,
Yes.
here you go, I gotta go, that tends to lend itself to some anxiety on the child. So building that time in to have a little bit of connection in the morning, where you're not rushing into the day, where things are more along their pace, even if it means you have to get up a little bit earlier, it can be really helpful.
Oh, significantly. So like feedings, if you're able to have a nice, non-rushed, whether that's nursing or feeding their bottle in the morning, can help kind of add to that calmness. And like Roberta said, inevitably, even though you might be losing a little more sleep, everything's going to be calmer and your child's going to be more calm. So when a child is less stressed, they're more likely to have better sleep and naps and all of that. Oh goodness, it's lots of different challenges there for sure. Somebody said something about I know I read something recently about like nursing your child. So even though you would have like a feeding session at home, when you get there nursing them, and you're not rushing to like drop them off, bye, or you're not in there to pick them up and let's go. You can sit down and nurse them or snuggle them. I think is helpful for children. And I think it's important to note that sometimes you're going to be in a rush. Sometimes you're not going to have the time, but when you do have the time, to let them see you like enjoying the space where they're spending their time, their daytime. So.
And I would say that the thing I invested a lot of time in when my children were that age is really getting to know their teachers and just really respecting and supporting them as much as I could. It's really helpful. Because one of mine wasn't so easy.
Yeah, for sure. I think personality is going to play a little piece there of your child's personality for sure.
Yes. So, well, thank you for letting me share.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you got to come. And Roberta, could you type your email address into the chat bar so if they have questions, they can send those to you?
Yes.
Any other questions? I know Brittany said that her phone died, so she had to leave, and Sydney often has to put Samuel down for a nap, so she tends to be able to come in early but not stay as late. So any other questions that come to mind for either you, Caitlin, or Heather?
That sweet little guy.
I know. He's getting so big. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
I'm always available if you have any questions or things that come up that we can support you with.
Thank
Awesome.
you. We're excited to come to see that and the children's place when it's back open and everything. So
Awesome.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye. Everybody have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye.